Your neighbor drives a 10-year-old Honda. Never upgraded, never complained. You assumed he was just getting by. Last month, he retired at 52. You know someone else, earns good money, has for years. Every few months there is a new phone, a new jacket, a small treat because life is short. Still has about 4 months of expenses saved. Still feels like the next raise will fix everything. And then there is your colleague at work. Mid-level job. Nothing flashy. But she mentioned once, almost by accident, that her investments do a lot of the work now. You did not fully understand what she meant. You still do not. These 3 people are not separated by income. They are not separated by luck. They are separated by one thing most people have never been told about compounding. It does not work equally for everyone. There is a minimum, a threshold. And the majority of people, no matter how much they learn about it, never actually cross it. That is what this video is about. My name is Finn. I have spent years reading about money, how it works, why people make the choices they make, and what actually separates people who build wealth from people who do not. One book that changed how I think about compounding was The Psychology of Money. It taught me that wealth is less about what you earn and more about what you leave untouched long enough to grow. This is Finn Sharp. I explain money simply. Let us get into it. The threshold exists, and most people are just below it. Here is the contradiction that nobody talks about. Compounding is described as the most powerful force in personal finance. And it is. But it only becomes powerful after a specific point. And before that point, it barely feels like anything at all. It is a Wednesday afternoon. You are sitting at your kitchen table. You just opened your banking app to check your savings. The number says $1,400. You have been saving for 8 months. You remember reading something about compounding interest, about money growing on its own. So you do the math in your head. Your account earns about 4% per year. You wait. At the end of the year, your $1,400 becomes $1,456. $56. You stare at that number for a moment. Then you close the app. You do not feel powerful. You feel like you have been lied to. That feeling is real. And it makes sense. Because $56 is not a life-changing number. It does not feel like a force. It feels like a rounding error. But here is what is actually happening. Compounding does not work like a light switch, on or off. It works like a slope. At the bottom of the slope, the movement is slow, almost invisible. You are doing everything right and getting almost nothing back. This is where most people give up. They save for a year, see almost no meaningful return, and quietly stop believing it works for them. The problem is not the math. The math is correct. The problem is the starting amount. Compounding rewards large bases. A small base gives you small returns. Not because something is wrong, but because the percentage is being applied to almost nothing. Think about it this way. 4% of $1,000 is $40. 4% of $10,000 is $400. 4% of $100,000 is $4,000. The rate is identical. But the outcome is completely different. The person with $100,000 earns what the person with $1,000 earns in a single day, not a year, a day. Here is what that looks like in real numbers. You save $200 every month. That is $2,400 per year. $2,400 x 10 years = $24,000 in contributions. At 7% average annual return, that grows to roughly $33,000. That is $9,000 in compounded growth over a decade. $9,000 over 10 years = $900 per year = $75 per month in real-world impact. $75 a month after 10 years of consistency. That is not nothing, but it is not freedom either. Not because compounding is a myth, because you have not yet crossed the threshold where it starts working for you instead of with you. The minimum is not a number anyone prints on a poster, but it is real. Knowing the threshold exists does not tell you where it is. That is the next problem. Most people who understand compounding still feel like they are waiting for something to happen. They are saving. They are consistent. But the number in their account moves slowly, and life keeps asking for money faster than the account grows. The threshold feels like a wall they cannot see. They only feel it when they run into it again and again. It is Saturday morning. You are at the grocery aisle, fourth one in, reaching for the olive oil you normally buy. Your hand stops. You remember you spent $340 on car repairs last week. You put back the olive oil and grab the cheaper one. Then, in the parking lot, you sit in your car for a minute before driving home. Not because you are tired, because you are doing the math in your head again. The math that never quite balances. That moment, that parking lot math, is the sign of someone living below the threshold. Below the threshold, every unexpected expense is a setback. A $300 repair does not just cost $300. It costs $300 in real money and months in delayed savings and something harder to measure. The feeling that the finish line is moving. When savings reset every time life happens, compounding cannot build. It keeps starting over. And a reset savings account is just a slow checking account. The threshold is different for everyone, but in general terms, it is the point where your compounding returns become large enough to absorb a normal life expense without destroying your progress. That is when the math finally starts feeling real. Here's a simple way to see it. Start with $500 saved. Monthly contribution, $300. Annual return, 7%. Year 1, roughly $4,100 saved year 1 return. Approximately $180. Start with $10,000 saved. Same monthly contribution of $300. Same 7% return. Year 1, roughly $14,200 saved year 1 return. Approximately $840. Same effort, same habits, same monthly discipline. But one person earns $180 from compounding that year. The other earns $840. The person who started with $10,000 earned enough to cover a car repair without touching their monthly budget. The person who started with $500 did not even come close. Not because they saved less each month, because they had not yet built a base large enough to absorb real life. Below the threshold, you are saving at life. Above it, money starts saving itself. Building a base sounds simple. But there is one force that quietly destroys bases before they form. Here is the contradiction nobody warns you about. The people most motivated to save are often the same people whose savings never compound. They read the right things. They open the right accounts. They start. And then something happens. Something small, something completely reasonable, and the account empties. Not all at once. Slowly. In ways that feel justified every single time. It is a Tuesday evening. You are sitting on the couch after a long day. Your phone is in your hand. You see a notification, a sale on something you have needed for months. The price is down 40%. It is a good deal. You look at your savings balance, $2,200. You think, I will put this back in 2 months. You press buy. 2 months later, the balance is still $1,800. Not because you spent more, because something else came up. Something always comes up. This is the base erosion problem, and it is invisible while it is happening. Every time a base empties and restarts, the compounding clock resets. A savings account that goes from $0 to $2,000 and back to $0 repeatedly does not compound anything. It just cycles. The motion looks like progress. The math says otherwise. The danger is not that people spend recklessly. The danger is that people spend reasonably on real things, real needs, real opportunities. And never notice that reasonable spending at the wrong time is just as destructive as impulsive spending. There is a rule that does not get talked about enough. Before the base is built, it cannot be touched. Not for sales. Not for opportunities. Not for good deals. The base must become a number you treat like it does not exist. Not locked away. Just mentally unavailable. Here is what base erosion costs in real math. You save $400 per month. Every 18 months, a life expense resets you to $0. Over 10 years, your average sustained balance, roughly $3,600. At 7% return, compounding earns approximately $252 per year on average. Now compare. Same $400 per month, no resets, base preserved throughout. Year 10 balance, approximately $69,000 at 7% return, earning roughly $4,800 per year by year 10. The gap between these two paths is $4,500 per year in compounding returns alone from the same monthly savings. The only difference is one person's base survived. The other person's did not. Not because they spent too much, because every reasonable reset cost them years of compounding they will never recover. A base that keeps restarting is not a savings account. It is an expensive waiting room. Once the base survives long enough, something strange happens. The math starts to change shape. You have heard that compounding accelerates over time, but nobody tells you what that actually feels like, or how dramatically different it looks in year 12 versus year 3. Most people stop before they ever see it. They give up during the flat part of the slope. They never reach the steep part. And the steep part is the whole point. It is a Sunday morning. You are having coffee and you open your investment account out of habit. You have done this for years. Checked the number, felt mildly good, closed the app. But this morning, something is different. The account earned more last month than you contributed. You stare at that line for a moment. Your money made more money last month than you put in. You close the app. You sit there quietly. Something has shifted. That moment is what crossing the threshold actually feels like. Not a party, not a dramatic announcement. Just a quiet Sunday morning where the math finally looks different. Here is why it changes. In the early years, your contributions drive the growth. Your account grows because you keep adding to it. Compounding adds a little. You add a lot. In the later years, after the base is established and undisturbed, the compounding starts adding more than you do. The money starts doing the work. You become a passenger rather than the engine. This shift does not happen at a fixed date. It happens at a fixed base. The larger and more protected the base, the earlier it arrives. Here's the math on both sides of the threshold. Investor A, $200 per month, starts at $0, no disruptions, 7% return. Year 5 balance, roughly $14,400. Compounding contribution, $1,000 that year, year 10 balance, roughly $34,600. Compounding contribution, $2,400 that year, year 15 balance, roughly $62,500. Compounding contribution, $4,400 that year. Investor B, same $200 per month, but starts with an existing base of $15,000. Year 5 balance, roughly $36,300. Compounding contribution, $2,500 that year, year 10 balance, roughly $63,200. Compounding contribution, $4,400 that year, year 15 balance, roughly $101,800. Compounding contribution, $7,100 that year. Same monthly habit. The only difference is the base at the start. By year 15, Investor B earns $2,700 more per year from compounding alone. Over 5 more years, that difference pays for a car. Not because Investor B earned more or saved more each month, because Investor B started above the threshold where compounding has room to accelerate. Most people wait for compounding to rescue them. The people above the threshold built a base first and let compounding reward them for it. Your neighbor who retired at 52 did not get lucky with stocks. He just never let his base reset. For 20 years, that number sat untouched while everything around it quietly grew. He did not drive a new car because the old one still worked. Every time he could have spent reasonably, he asked one question first. Does this touch the base? Usually, it did. Usually, he said no. Your friend who earns well and still feels behind. He is not careless. He is just below the threshold. Each reset feels justified. The raise comes, the lifestyle adjusts, the saving cycle starts again. The account grows to a point that feels good. Something happens. It starts over. The compounding clock never runs long enough to change his life. Not yet. And your colleague, who said her investments do a lot of the work now, she was not being mysterious. She crossed the threshold years ago. She probably does not remember exactly when. There was no announcement. 1 month, the returns were bigger than her contributions. She kept going. Now the slope does the work. The big truth is simple. Compounding is not magic. It is math. And math rewards bases, not intentions. The people who feel like compounding does not work for them are almost always below the minimum. The point where returns become real, where growth survives a car repair, where money finally starts making more money than you put in. Most financial advice skips this part. It tells you to start early and be consistent. Both are true. But neither one works if your base keeps resetting to zero. You do not need more information about compounding. You need a base large enough that compounding can actually do something with. If this changed how you see what it really takes to reach compounding that works, there is more where this came from. FinSharp exists to explain money in a way that actually makes sense. Subscribe so you do not miss what comes next. And remember, the goal is not to save forever. The goal is to save long enough that the money runs out of excuses not to grow.